Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. For you today, I have one of the most inspirational characters in the fight against sugar and promoting low-carb, real food eating. It is cardiologist and science director of Action on Sugar, Dr. Aseem Malhotra. How's it going, Aseem?
Hi, Sam. Good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good to see you. And even though we're in the same city, but it still makes it easier to do it via Google Hangouts.
Yeah, modern technology, mate. Modern technology.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? Don't have to get the tube. Particularly this time. Be a right pain on a Friday night. Anyway, so recently, Donald O'Neill, who is the creator of Serial Killers movie, the documentary film that's had a sequel to it called Run on Fat, had an absolutely outstanding kind of run with Serial Killers and Serial Killers 2, Run on Fat. Now they're going to be making a third documentary under the title The Pioppi Protocol. And that's what we're going to be talking about mainly today. And just to give people just a quick snippet, Pioppi, I believe, is the area just south of Naples in Italy that Ancel Keys lived in.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Sam. So Pioppi is a village about an hour and a half drive south of Naples. And it's where Ancel Keys actually spent about 30 years of his life. He spent about 6 months a year for 30 years researching, or that was a base for him where he did his research on the Mediterranean diet. So this is a village of, no more than 190 people.
Wow, proper.
So
proper.
This is supposed to be the home of the Mediterranean diet.
Ah, I see. And it's got some good alliteration with the Pioppi Protocol. And that's the movie that Donald and yourself are trying to make. And there is a Kickstarter campaign that people can check out if they want to right now. If they go to smashthefat.com/CK3, that'll take you through to the Kickstarter page where you can see all of the pledges that you can make and why you might want to pledge. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into all of that, Doc, tell us how you got from the position that you were, kind of a day-to-day doctor, dealing with all sorts of heart problems and things. And now you're still doing that a little bit, but you're also battling this incredible battle against the sugar industry.
Yeah, Sam, well, to be honest, it's interesting. Yeah, for me, it's been a fascinating journey over the last few years. But my main inspiration, in fact, my only inspiration is the health of my patients and the public. And for me, that's where it all started, with patients, increasing demand on the service, working as a trained cardiologist a few years ago when I was in my training at Harefield Hospital, and I would see people coming in with heart attacks, more stress on the system. And obviously we're still feeling that now. In fact, it's probably got a lot worse than it was even a few years ago, and realizing that the current status quo is not sustainable, and really going into my own kind of researching in a way, what can we do to reduce demand on the system? Because until we address the root cause of the problem, this situation isn't going to get better. We can do in medicine. We've got an amazing modern technology. We've got amazing treatments for acute illnesses that are life-saving. But actually, for many patients, many people, some of this stuff is no better than putting a plaster on a severed artery. So, I'm very proud of the work that I've been involved in and been able to do as a cardiologist and treating people with disease. But to be honest with you, Sam, I'd rather people weren't thrown into the river in the first place, rather than me having to save them from drowning. And what's been a really interesting sort of something that I've learned, if you like, over the last few years, and now realize is the key issue, is the fact that diet-related disease is probably the biggest factor driving demand on the system, on the service. So diet is the most important factor, and therefore we need to get the dietary advice right. We need to think about how can we improve population health to give people healthier choices than they have at the moment. We have this massive problem with an oversupply of cheap, sugary junk food. It co-opts our ability to make, healthy choices, and this is what needs to be addressed. And until we do that, then we're not going to make much progress.
Absolutely, and this new documentary film is going to be part and parcel of that, because essentially what you're going to be investigating what the true Mediterranean diet is. Yeah. So how did this collaboration come about?
Well, you mentioned Donal O'Neill at the beginning, and I was in fact with you, Sam. In fact, you were the one that introduced me to Donal when we went to the screening. When we went to the screening, yeah, absolutely. You should get full credit for that, by the way. You brought it up there. But no, when we went to see the screening of Serial Killers, and that was the first time I met Donal, and I thought it was brilliant. It was a brilliant film. He'd done amazing work. Donal had his own, obviously, life experience to talk about, being a former international athlete, and having to question also the dietary advice after his father, obviously in the film, as you know, suffered a heart attack. He wanted to work out why that happened. And then he went on his journey. And interestingly, the timing of when we saw the screening of Serial Killers was actually the very day before there was a press release that the Cambridge MRC, in collaboration with the British Heart Foundation, had come out on a very extensive study later about whether or not saturated fat was a major determinant of heart disease, and they concluded that it was questionable at best. So actually perfectly timed. And again, there's been and that was just a few months after my BMJ piece, and of course saturated fat is not the major issue, where I had obviously looked at the data and really written quite a provocative article questioning the whole issue around saturated fat and heart disease. And I think we've moved on a lot since then. There are still forces that are resisting this, that feel that they can't accept that saturated fat may not be a cause of heart disease. But it's a more nuanced discussion. It's about food groups, and all saturated fats are not the same. I don't know if that's something something we need to probably discuss a bit, is that there are many different types of saturated fats that probably have different biological effects on the body. And the evidence is telling us now, and quite consistently, that it's very likely that full-fat dairy products, in particular full-fat cheese and yogurt, is likely to be protective against type 2 diabetes and heart disease, which is, it's still, my patients still find astonishing when I tell them that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bombshell for people. I was doing a talk this afternoon at Booking.com, and kind of saying things similar to this, and everybody's jaws kind of dropping on the floor, and they're kind of taken aback. Because the people still try to follow kind of NHS and BDA guidelines, and they're unfortunately coming to no avail in terms of results. And kind of when you tell this to people, they're like, "Whoa, seriously?" But there's strong scientific evidence behind this, right?
Sam, it's a very good point, and I think that everyone's intentions were good, but there has been some flawed science. There's no doubt about it. And it takes time to change, and science evolves. I often tell my medical students and other people that medicine itself is not an exact science; it's more the art of probability. And and even within what we learn in medical school as well, often a lot of that turns out to change later down the line. In fact, the former dean of Harvard Medical School is quoted as saying that half of what you learn in medical school will turn out to be wrong years later. The problem is you don't know which half. But we've got to be a bit, we've got to exercise all of this with a bit of humility as well. But the problem is there's a very serious issue here, and you're absolutely right. How have we ended up in this mess? And there are many factors, but I'm very convinced that the wrong dietary advice, or dietary advice that has been heavily flawed, is a root cause of the problem of obesity. And we've seen it with sugar at the very least. It's still a major problem. We know that the labeling, for example, on sugar in the EU is still suggesting, or can be interpreted, we should be consuming 22.5 teaspoons of sugar per day, when the World Health Organization has given a limit of 6. And you and I know there is no biological or nutritional value requirement for added sugar whatsoever.
It's crazy, isn't it? And all of this kind of came about from this epidemiological study by Ancel Keys, called the 7-country study. Originally, I think it was the 6-country study. Yeah. And it all started off in Pioppi, which is what the film's about. So tell us a little bit about Ancel Keys and where this investigation that you and Donald and I think there's a chef that's helping you out as well, I believe. And kind of where this investigation's going to go.
Yeah, we don't want to give obviously too much away, Sam, but yeah,
no.
but but you know, so Ancel Keys is an American scientist that basically was probably the most influential man in the history of nutrition, because you know his and I'm not saying that he was completely wrong in any way. I think you know he's been the sort of brainchild behind what people determine as think to be the Mediterranean diet, and he looked at several countries, which you know throughout the world, mainly in Europe, and where he correlated the consumption of saturated fat, increased cholesterol as a cause of heart disease. Now we know that correlation wasn't as clear cut when you bring in other countries that didn't necessarily fit with his hypothesis. Now, talk about specifics, we know saturated fat does raise LDL cholesterol, but interestingly, it varies from person to person. But at the same time, it also raises HDL cholesterol, which is a good cholesterol. And what many people still fully don't appreciate, but when we calculate people's heart disease risk, we look at their total cholesterol to HDL ratio. We don't use LDL specifically when we calculate their risk of heart disease at 10 years. And there's a risk calculator. Anyone can go on the internet and plug in, once they know their values, into that and work out their risk of heart disease over 10 years. And saturated fat, that's probably one of the mechanisms, is that many people actually, because the HDL gets raised significantly, the overall ratio doesn't change very much, and therefore it probably isn't so much of a factor. So that was one thing, obviously, that's come out more recently. But Ancel Keys basically spent a lot of time in this Italian village, and he probably, one of the areas in Italy was one of the countries that was studied, obviously, where he felt there was a low incidence of heart disease, and it was a Mediterranean country. And he demonized dairy to some degree, but we'll explore why that happened when they'll come out in the film and see exactly what may have gone wrong, and also then how his actual advice may have also been misinterpreted. And again, yes. I don't think Ancel Keys. I think Ancel Keys did a lot of great work. I'll be very honest. I think one thing that, but the question is, how was it also? Were there some slight flaws in what he did, and also how's it been interpreted as well? So all of that comes in.
And something just before you move on, sorry, Aseem, is there something that's interesting in the trailer? You actually talk about the fact that later on in Ancel Keys' life, he actually tried to publish a paper that refuted his earlier work. And Steve Finney talks about a story that he tried to get it published, but he couldn't. Yeah.
So again, that will come out in a little bit more detail. But yes, certainly there was further research he wanted to publish, around cholesterol and heart disease, but he was unable to get it published. He wasn't being accepted in major medical journals. So it'd be interesting to also explore, and that will also come out in the film, exactly what that was all about. Why, and to question why would someone of Ancel Keys' stature, who had such a big influence on dietary policy, worldwide, why was it? What was wrong with this particular paper, and why would it not? Why were journals refusing to publish it?
Very interesting, dodgy, suspicious almost as well. Now, going back to the Mediterranean diet as a whole. Now, my mum, right, she owns a place out in Crete, and I go out there relatively occasionally, relatively often, sorry. And the one thing that you get when you are and it's a small village, kind of sounds very similar to Pioppi, maybe a little larger, maybe 400 people or something like that, is that they eat a lot of animal products, they eat a lot of animal foods, mainly lamb, actually, and a lot of yogurt as well, and a lot of eggs too. So which is really interesting. And they'll have.
And it's not been, you know, and it's an important point, Sam, about that is it's not a place that's been heavily commercialized as far as you know when you've been there.
Oh no. This is a tiny little village that's, you know, not got that many tourists.
Okay.
So it's absolutely fascinating. What is the Mediterranean diet as say Ancel Keys envisaged it?
Well, what we know it to be in terms of, you know, when you look at, you know, you go NHS Choices or you Google the Mediterranean diet, it does seem to be a diet that is quite high in carbohydrates. Now, certainly there are lots of vegetables on there, but there seems to be a lot of bread and pasta. And if you look at the base of the food pyramid, it's actually made up of a very sort of carbohydrates that are very starchy. And that's interesting. Because, you know, one of the issues that we're facing, Sam, as you know, in the modern day is that not only the epidemic of obesity, but perhaps probably more importantly, is the epidemic of type 2 diabetes, which is massively increasing in prevalence. And, you know, traditionally, type 2 diabetes is actually a disease of carbohydrate intolerance, the body's inability to metabolize carbohydrates. So, and obviously all carbohydrates are not the same. So it's more the processed carbohydrates, which are the ones that are, you know, lacking in fiber, the issue. But then the question is why would that feature so highly in the Mediterranean diet if these are, you know, a high consumption of these foods? And in my view, I've said this before publicly, I think that the current dietary advice is a root cause of the type 2 diabetes and obesity epidemic, especially specifically one that advises you to reduce your total fat intake. And even if we don't even to go into a discussion about saturated fat, even reducing total fat intake and having a high consumption of carbohydrates has been an issue. And again, I think it's also where do the carbohydrates come from? And, you know, sugars has been a big issue. There's no doubt about it. That is a major factor in my view driving this problem. But also there are other refined carbohydrates, your white breads, white pastas. But again, you know, we will explore that in the film and maybe, you know, talk about that in a bit more detail and try and explain you know, what may have happened there.
Because when you do go to the Mediterranean and go wherever you are, whether it be Italy or Crete, they do consume a lot of fat, and it will be olive oil, full fat yogurt, eggs, you know, lamb with all the fat still on it, and everything like that. So I don't know why it became sort of a lower fat diet, which seems weird.
Well, I think, you know, coming back to Ancel Keys, I think the one of the big issues has been this obsession, Sam. I mean, complete and total obsession with cholesterol. Now, I'm not saying cholesterol isn't a risk factor for heart disease, but in my view, it's been grossly overblown. And in fact, we published a paper recently in the postgraduate medical journal called Right Care Cardiology. So doctors' responsibilities to the individual and the population. And it talks about modern treatments for heart disease. And obviously there's a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily benefit patients. But one of the specific things that we found when we were writing this up and we've referenced is the fact that insulin resistance, when it comes to preventing heart attacks in the younger adult population, insulin resistance is perhaps the most important factor, more important than high blood pressure, more important than body mass index, more important than low HDL cholesterol, and more important than LDL cholesterol, you know, by far. And I think that's where, you know, we've got things a little bit wrong. I think the obsession with cholesterol means that everyone is focused just on lowering cholesterol by any means. What's fascinating is if you look at the data, there is no consistent evidence anywhere that taking food specifically for the purpose of lowering cholesterol has any outcome benefit in terms of reducing your death or heart attacks. And we know that even for statins, in people who are otherwise healthy or don't have established heart disease, statins don't prolong your life by 1 day, and they're very potent lowerers of cholesterol. So I'm not saying cholesterol isn't a risk factor, and it depends on certain population groups, but it's interesting that if you concentrate on diet to lower cholesterol, it may not be the right way forward. And actually what we found in another publication, which we published recently in BMJ Open Heart, which is about how dietary changes can rapidly reduce your risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. When you look at the data in terms of a higher fat Mediterranean diet, specifically with olive oil and nuts, the benefits seemed to be independent of cholesterol lowering. So in the groups that weren't having this sort of high-fat Mediterranean diet, that didn't have the, the mortality benefit, if you like, or the benefit in terms of reduction in heart attack and stroke, there was no significant difference in cholesterol between the two groups. So that makes you, and we know that the effects of dietary changes or the diets that are going to be best beneficial for your health are independent of your cholesterol. And I think, again, this is something we're going to explore a little bit further.
Fantastic. That gets me excited, because I want to see what a true Mediterranean diet is, because I know from having read up a bit, Ancel Keys possibly visited some of the places during Lent, which would have skewed results, and also like little other nuances as well that would have skewed his initial point of view, and possibly why he was going to refute it later in his career. I mean, I just can't wait for it to be made. But unfortunately, because it's an indie film, we have to get the funding to get it to be made.
Sam,
and the only way to do that, go on.
No, Sam, I'm glad you've raised that point, actually. So yeah, so this is obviously through Kickstarter, which is a kind of crowdfunding, publicly funded film, and we need to get to £50,000 as a minimum, really, for the film to work. But what I only realized recently is if we don't hit the target of 50,000, then we don't get a penny. Everyone gets their money back. So even if we hit 49,000, everyone gets their money back in the time specified. And I think, if I remember correctly, where we are now, we've got around just over 2 weeks left. So we need to try and hit that target of 50,000. We're just around £15,000 at the moment. But I think it's about raising awareness, and it's great that we're talking about this today, because that certainly will help raise awareness about the film and the importance of it. Because one of the problems, again, with this whole issue around the problem with obesity and the science is that the very powerful vested interests that have made a lot of money at the expense, and that's the profit-making businesses at the expense of people's health, and people have become sick from it. So we want to make sure this is free of any kind of vested or corporate interest, if you like. We want this to be as pure and as clean as possible. So this is in an independent view, as independent as you can possibly go. And that's why we wanted to get it funded publicly, rather than get sponsorship from any particular company or institution. We wanted to go, through the public, really. So that, it's really important that we get as many people chipping in as much as they can. From as little as sort of £19 to get a digital download of the movie, to the maximum of £5,000, which is quite a lot to become an associate producer. But people can look at the Kickstarter page and see what they can contribute, and certainly share with their friends, because this is the way we're going to get this done. And it's really important, Sam. It's really important because we are going to go look at all the evidence and provide tools for people really to revolutionize health. Globally, this is something that's going to be relevant to people all around the world, for people of different sexes, of different ages, and different sizes as well. So this is really something for everyone.
And the idea is to get it to Downing Street and the White House.
Oh, absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely. I think because the tools are not just for individuals. We don't want to just. It's not just it's going to be. I very much hope it will be good and interesting viewing for people, and it will help individuals change and transform their lives. But there's also going to be information in there that very much could influence people at the top, and that means the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and David Cameron, so that they can have ideas for policy interventions that are going to improve population health as well.
That's absolutely fantastic, and so it's so important that if you do feel passionate about this, that you go to the Kickstarter page, which is, you can go to smashthefat.com/CK3. That'll forward you straight to the Kickstarter page, or you can just search for the Pioppi protocol on Kickstarter as well. And then you can pledge whatever you want. There are several packages, as Aseem said there. £19 is the bottom one for a digital download, to the top one being an associate producer at £5,000. But just give what you can so that we can get the message out there, investigate what the true Mediterranean diet is, and we can, as you say, Aseem, revolutionize health, which is what it's all about. Now, something else that I'm excited about as well as the Pioppi protocol, Serial Killers 3, is the fact that you now have a website and blog. Amazing. It's only taking you about two years, is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, people always say to me, Aseem, you need to get a website because, you know, we stick your name in Google and you're doing all these different things. And I kind of eventually succumbed and said, fine. So, you know, I was connected with through some friends in Cape Town, and, you know, and Panda Productions have done a great job. And really just to, you know, just to kind of summarize a lot of the things I've been doing over the last few years, and just, you know, somewhere people can go if they want to find out what I'm up to. In relation to the whole campaign on sugar, improving the nation's diet, and obviously also treatment of heart disease as well, and modern medicine. I mean, there's another aspect to all of this, and we've talked about this before, is that while we've neglected lifestyle, the impact of lifestyle and how important that can be on health, and massively so, at the same time, we've over-exaggerated the benefits of modern medicine, if you like, for a lot of chronic diseases. And we have a major problem now with, you know, another issue is that we've got millions of people who are probably very likely taking medications, and they don't realize there's going to be absolutely no benefit to them whatsoever. And this is a major problem. It's a major problem. So yeah, I mean, if you want to learn a bit more about that, then please, you know, visit my website, draseem.com, and you can have a read of various articles and things that I've been writing about with various other people, with the medical Royal Colleges, with the BMJ on this issue.
Fantastic. And just for those listening or watching, that's Doctor spelt out properly, so DOCTOR Aseem.com, because sometimes people just use the DR, but it's the full Doctor, DOCTOR Aseem.com. Check it out, subscribe, and also make sure that you follow Aseem on Twitter at Dr. Aseem Malhotra. And you can follow him on Twitter, where you're very prolific, Aseem, I'd like to say. Well, you got a retweet from Jamie Oliver the other day.
Oh, that was that was great actually. Jamie's a good man, and I've had a lot of interaction with Jamie over the last few years as well. So yeah, it was very good of him actually. He retweeted our the Kickstarter page, you know, and I know Jamie's had a look, and he likes the idea of the Pioppi protocol. So I think he's very interested in what we're going to come up with.
That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, hopefully we'll open many eyes with the film. But just again, everybody watching and listening, make sure that you go across to the Kickstarter page, smashthefat.com/CK3, check it out, see if it resonates with you, and then you can pledge whatever you can there, because as Aseem said earlier, if we don't make that £50,000 mark, then we can't make it, and we can't get the message out more and more. Unfortunately, Aseem, that's all we've got time for. Were there any other wise words that you wanted to leave with us?
No, I'll just finish with the quote that I always use again and again, and I think that we all putting things in perspective. It's a quote from Gandhi, and it's health is the real wealth. It is health that is the real wealth, and not pieces of gold and silver.
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks again, Doc. Everybody check out Aseem's website as well. That's DOCTOR Aseem.com. And I'll see you soon, mate.
All right, good to see you.
Fantastic. See you soon. Thanks,
cheers,
mate.
Cheers,
before you go, actually, I keep on doing this, and yeah, a lot of people on the YouTube comments particularly get annoyed at me. So usually we do a smash it out at the end of each episode, and lately I've been really forgetful because I've only been doing interviews kind of maybe once a month or every couple of weeks. So before we go, I'd like us to do a smash it out. So on the count of 3, I want you to shout smash it out to the camera.
No worries.
1, 2, 3.
Smash it out.
That's what I'm talking about. Thank you so much, Aseem. Greatly appreciated. And I'll see you soon, mate.
Take care. Bye-bye.